Welcome to the church family that is lifting lives through living love, inspiring hope, filling with faith, and transforming our world. These recorded messages are made available so that you might have additional opportunities to stay connected with us, and that you might learn and grow in your faith. God bless you as you hear the word today. And now, the message.
Today's scripture is from the book of Genesis, chapter 1, verses 24 through 31. And this is from the Common English Bible translation. God said, "Let the earth produce every kind of living thing, livestock, crawling things, and wildlife." And that's what happened. God made every kind of wildlife, every kind of livestock, and every kind of creature that crawls on the ground. God saw how good it was. Then God said, "Let us make humanity in our image to resemble us, so that they may take charge of the fish of the sea, the birds in the sky, the livestock, all the earth, and all the crawling things on earth." God created humanity in God's own image. In the divine image, God created them. Male and female, he created them. God blessed them and said to them, "Be fertile and multiply. Fill the earth and master it. Take charge of the fish of the sea, the birds in the sky, and everything crawling on the ground." Then God said, "I now give to you all the plants on the earth that yield seeds, and all the trees whose fruit produces its seeds within it. These will be your food. To all wildlife, to all the birds in the sky, and to everything crawling on the ground, to everything that breathes, I give all the green grasses for food." And that's what happened. God saw everything he had made. It was supremely good. There was evening and there was morning, the sixth day. May the Lord bless the reading and the hearing of his word.
It's great to see you all here today. So for those of you that I've not yet had a chance to meet, my name is Amber Good, and I am one of the pastors here at Zionsville. So one of my core interests, as you might have learned a little bit earlier, is nature, and specifically ecology. And this is because I most easily recognize God's presence in my life in nature. And I'm not the only one. I know many other people out there do as well. And our early church fathers, including John Wesley, pictured here, also enjoyed nature and talked about the book of nature. The book of nature, you might say. Well, did you know way back then it was considered that there were two books. God had two books in which God revealed God's self. One of those, of course, is our Holy Scriptures, and the other is the book of nature, because that is where God first showed up. Where God showed who God is, God revealing God's self from the very moment of creation. In Romans 1:20, Paul said, "For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, God's eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen. They are understood through the things that God has made, so humans are without excuse." Well, from as early as I can remember, and no, to my kids, I was not there when God created the earth. But from as early as I can remember, I've always loved nature, specifically animals, the furry ones. The plants and the trees came later as I began to really understand the importance of habitat and the uniqueness and purposes of each of those parts. It created in me a wonder for nature, and that, I think, is where this interest comes from. And I consider that this empathy I have for nature is my unique gift from God. So I didn't grow up playing in the woods. I didn't grow up on a farm. And I didn't grow up with a family who really enjoyed spending time outdoors either. I did grow up in an area that encouraged and enjoyed the development of woodlands and wetlands into shopping centers. Nature was as far removed from human doings as could be. There was no place for people in nature. So my call to care for nature and my compassion for creatures, while it has always been a part of me, it has never been easy to live into, and it wasn't an easy path to follow. So a quick example for you. I live in Hamilton County, which in many ways is very similar to Boone County. This is great because I like to eat out a lot. I like big juicy hamburgers, and I really like brick oven pizza, as my family can attest to. I like really soft t-shirts. I prefer wearing jeans or leggings if the weather's right. They're so soft. I like to travel. I prefer not to eat vegetables. I like coffee a lot. And my preferred drinks are not water or tea, but Coke or Pepsi Zero. And these are my struggles too, because these things that I enjoy so much are harmful to the Earth's ecology. And these days, we're all struggling with what it means to live into being more environmentally conscious. And for some of us, it's become a political issue because terms like climate change have helped us to forget what we're really talking about, which is pollution and overconsumption of the Earth's resources. Because we choose to eat things like hamburgers or chicken nuggets, sometimes at every meal, we're causing the demand for meat to rise. And this demand encourages deforestation, and that's for the purposes of grazing as well as growing row crops. That's because these things aren't food directly for people, but because they feed animals. It's happening at alarming rates in other countries because we can buy their livestock sometimes cheaper than what we can buy the meat here. And did you know that, I already mentioned this, but the majority of those row crops are often put into animal feed. And then the other source of that is we do use a lot of that in our own manufactured products. And that's good because that means they're also biodegradable. Did you know that our really soft t-shirts, these things that I like so much, are soft because they are bathed in a chemical solution that breaks down the fibers? That's a lot of times why you have to wash on delicate cycle, because they've already been broken down so much that they become even more delicate the more we wash them. And because they're produced often in foreign countries that don't have a lot of environmental regulations or human regulations, this water is discarded in harmful ways. So that becomes not just a problem for nature, it becomes a problem for the people as well, doesn't it? The people who are stuck working in the factories, who are often women and children, are subjected to the inhumane practices, abuse, disease caused by the chemicals that they're working with. The water they drink then and the air they breathe are also polluted by these same industries. And yet they have employment because we are one of the nations that are buying their products. Now, I could go on, but really, what I really want to do today is just catch your attention. I don't want to get stuck in a feeling of hopelessness, because that feeling of hopelessness then inspires apathy. And apathy and inaction gets us into a point of just resignation. There's so much, what can I do? And that's not what I want to do today. So I'm hoping you can see how much bigger than us the world really is. That the actions, small actions that we do here really can have an impact on the other side of the world. We're contributing to pollution in ways that go well beyond simple production and in ways that go well beyond the borders of our country or even our community. So in Genesis 1, we have an affirmation of faith. It wasn't written by the ancient Israelites as a way to record a historical way that the world was made. It was instead created to affirm God as creator. God put the solar system together. God ascribed all of the functions. God interwove all of life so that life could thrive. And humankind is one of those life forms. So humans were understood as part of the creation, not separate from it. And in fact, humans are special. We are so special that we hold godlike power in a way that can utterly destroy creation, or if we recognize our role as God's children, made in the likeness of God, can bring about the redemption of all creation for the glory of God. As Paul said in Romans 8:20 through 22, creation was subjected to frustration, not by its own will, but by the one who created it. But it was in the hope that the creation itself will be set free from slavery to decay and brought into the glorious freedom of God's children. We know that the whole creation is groaning together and suffering labor pains up until now. And then we have Genesis 1:28. This is the verse that's thought to have had such a strong influence through the centuries in contorting how we understand this affirmation of faith that we find in Genesis. So I'm sure many of you have heard how it's to subdue and to dominate the earth. And those are the words that get kind of changed in meaning for us today. For us today, that's about power and strength and hierarchy. But what it really means, or meant for those back in ancient Israelite times, was to serve and protect. So ecological stewardship really isn't so far off, is it? When you understand what it means to have dominion, as it was intended in Genesis, I think it changes how we perceive the world. The biblical term for dominion, radah, relates to stewardship. Created in the image of God to subdue and have dominion over meant that we are in effect standing in for God. We are God's stewards. These are qualities of rulership. In the Bible, kings were expected to serve and protect their people. It wasn't about lording over them and being greater than. It was about serving them and protecting them for the benefit of the whole nation. So when you understand what it means to have dominion, I think it changes our perspective of how we perceive the world around us. And we can take this one step further as well. So a hallmark of God is God's chesed. Now that is another Hebrew word that means loving kindness or steadfast love, mercy. It's where grace comes from, this whole idea. So if we are to understand our roles within creation, do you think it's really about dominating nature and using it, about taking what we want without worrying about consequences? Or could it be that God's domain is where God's dominion happens? Shouldn't God's dominion be about showing loving kindness and mercy? Isn't that what Jesus came to show us? And I wonder what he might have said about this. And you remember that one verse from Matthew. It's a few verses, chapter 25, chapter 6, verses 25 through 34. The birds of the field, they're not working, and yet God cares for them. And then there's the lilies of the field. They're beautiful. Now, this particular picture, I'm happy to say I took it, but unfortunately, when I took it, my camera couldn't grasp the glitter that was showing up in this flower. It was highlighted by the evening sun, and it was just glowing. It was magnificent. And it just reminded me of this exact verse, in that not even Solomon was clothed in such splendor as these flowers, and they're dead at the end of summer and thrown into the fire. So how much more does God care for us? I think it's time then that we reset our mindset. It's time for us all to begin living in new ways of understanding our place here and now. When we care about clean water, then we make sure our industries are making sound, ecological, and sustainable manufacturing choices. And when we care about clean air, we ensure that the lungs of the earth are able to function at full capacity. You all remember the warning shot we heard from COVID. For ourselves, it's important that we have breathing capacity, because when some of that breathing capacity becomes diminished, like through a respiratory disease, and then you add in a compounding factor like some other disease, it can cause us trouble with capital letters. Well, I wonder if that isn't what we're doing. Through deforestation and polluting our ocean ways, we're destroying those mechanisms that the earth has of balancing itself, of writing too much of one sort of, like carbon dioxide in the air. And then when you throw in the air pollution that we keep throwing into the air, it causes greater and greater issues. So when we pay attention to the products we buy and the foods we eat, the fuels we consume, and the waste we produce, then maybe together we can begin to reset the systems. And together educating ourselves about the harms we do isn't about feeling guilty. No, it's about repentance, about pulling away from the harmful things that we do and working towards a more life-affirming way of living. And that's what Christ is here to remind us. Christ came that all might have abundant life, that we can live in a way that is more just for all creation, inclusive of our human sisters and brothers. It means to live in a more careful way. And so I've taken steps to become more ecologically sound. Am I perfect? No. Do I always make a good ecological choice? No. But I can do, and we can take steps in that way. So, for instance, Matt and I have started adding more vegetables into our diet. That's good. And we buy them from local farmers. And I'm trying to put in a meat substitute into our diet because that is something that even my doctor can be happy about. But you don't want a meat substitute? Sometimes I don't either. Most of the times I don't either. But I can buy meat from local farmers. And then I am not only just caring for how the animal was raised and where my meat comes from, but I'm also caring for the farmer because I'm supporting their livelihood. I can also take an extra minute to find out where my soft t-shirts are coming from, how they're produced, and I can work towards supporting those companies and those crafters who are working towards a more ecologically sustainable way of making things. So it really is our Christian duty to be ecologically minded. And I don't think you have to be a crazy eco-warrior person to do it. There are quite a few ways to be better stewards. We're talking about water in August because here we are at the end of summer, right? And so these are just a few simple things you might be able to do as well. How else might you reset your mindset towards creation care?
Well, I just want to take a few minutes and kind of debrief this with everyone. So, starters, I mean, I've known you for a little over a month, really working together, and in that time, I mean, it's clear this is a core passion for you, caring for God's earth. And so, I'm curious, just so you can share with everyone, where did that passion come from?
Well, from as early as I can remember, I've just loved nature, animals in particular. What I wanted to be when I grew up, besides an Avon lady like my mom, was an animal. And so I'd have my hands I'd run around like an animal. But as I grew up, I matured a little bit. And then I just loved nature in many ways. I read about them, I studied them on my own, not just in school. So just something that's a part of me.
And we were kind of laughing about this because, of course, if you love animals, everyone says, well, you should be a veterinarian. And I had the same thing because I love dogs. Like we have always had dogs. I had 3 dogs growing up. And so I always thought, I want to be a vet. And then you had the experience, was it career day?
Yes. So leading up even into college. So on the career path, there's a day that comes up in high school that you're allowed to choose your choice career to go out and spend a day in it to see if you really want to do that. And so I chose veterinarian. Of course, why not veterinarian? But we got into the middle of a surgery and I got hot and sweaty. It was a particular kind of surgery, right? Yes, it was the most common surgery out there, which was a neutering. It was awful. They have much more humane ways of doing things, I think, these days, but it was, I noticed I got hot, the lights were there, and my stomach really started hurting. I said, I need to sit down, and so they gave me a little stool, and that's where I decided.
Not going to be a
veterinarian is not for me. That doesn't mean I can't still have dogs. So fortunately, also during high school, I enjoyed foreign languages. So I took French and German throughout high school. And so I was encouraged to follow that path to become a French major in college. So I enrolled in college as a French major. And during my first semester, I had a counselor who said, hey, take an elective next semester and you choose something that is one of your passions. It's one of your hobbies, maybe. And so I looked through the course lineup, and there was Wildlife in America, an introductory course. So I said, I want that. Well, I took that course. I just loved it. I met with the professor, and before the next semester began, I had switched over to wildlife science.
And see, when I had the opportunity to do that in college, we all looked through and looked for the easy A. Didn't you guys do that? Like, oh, I get to take anything. What's the easiest A I could find? I kid you not. I took juggling in college. And it was really hard. So anyways, so wildlife in America. And then that kind of sets you on a pathway of wildlife sciences.
It did, yes.
So what do you do with wildlife sciences? I mean,
so technically it should be something made for grad students to go on and further learn about wildlife. But I was so burnt out when I even started college that the last thing I wanted to do was to sign up for, 2 to 4 more years of college.
You needed to take juggling. It would have calmed you down.
Calmed me down.
Anyway, sorry.
Matt took bowling.
There you go. That's my man. Anyways, so you didn't go to grad school?
No, instead I got a part-time seasonal position with the Indiana Department of Natural Resources as an interpretive naturalist. And I loved it. It was great. The worst part about it was that I also had to have about 3 other jobs to pay my bills, and I still didn't even have insurance. So eventually, after about 4 years of juggling all those jobs, I got a full-time job in Indianapolis as a claims person. I didn't process claims, but it was in an office behind a desk, something I said I would never do, and I did it. About 11 years.
11 years. And I have all kinds of questions about what an interpretive naturalist does. I mean, like, you're talking about the book of nature, and I'm like, what, anyways, but I have all kinds of questions about it. So for 11 years, you did insurance, and I'm sure in some ways that had to feel like kind of a small death to your spirit, of like you felt this passion, and then somehow you felt a call into ministry. And I'm just curious, how did ministry and this original call and passion around ecology, how did those reconnect?
Well, it was actually organic farming. I'd seen barren fields all through winters, growing up, driving from Lafayette or in Logansport to Lafayette at Purdue, or to see my grandparents. And so the organic piece of that came in, which was really more of a permaculture. And now I know I'm throwing all sorts of big words out there. But really, it was about bringing life back into a local farming aspect. And we all need farms to survive, right? And so that's where it really connected. And I began seeing the care that people in the church were giving to the nature part around that farm. And somewhere in there, amongst some other Bible studies and things, this was a confluence of my faith, all kept bubbling up and happening. And pretty soon I was like, okay, I get it. You want me to go to seminary. And so when I enrolled in seminary, I was going to take all of my required courses first, get them out of the way. And so that's what I did. I started enrolling in the required courses. And that first semester there, I was introduced to a course called Theologies for the Birds and the Trees and the People. It's like, what is that? So I took it. I loved it. I loved it so much that I didn't just stick with my Master of Divinity degree. I added a Master of Theological Studies. And so from there, I was able to tack on, I didn't tack on, I found some sort of eco-theology course, at least every year, and something every semester I was able to work on a project around ecology theology, which is when I shortened to eco-theology, I'm saying ecological theology.
Yeah. So it seems like there's a pattern here. Every time you get to take an extra class, this is, and I know that because I always have felt like even in whatever job I'm doing, there's always a side hustle. And not a side hustle but something I'm drawn to. And the more you're drawn to it, the more that kind of speaks to what's in your heart. And I know you would share with me the Parker Palmer quote that I love as well, that, how does it go? The place of your call is where your deepest passion and the world's needs connect.
Yes.
And for you, that is ecology. So then my question is, now that you're here at Zionsville, how does this fit? So for those of you who don't know, Amber's role is pastor of community engagement. And so when we first were kind of designing this role, we were thinking about missions. But how does this connect the ecology side of this for you?
Well, as I was touching on in some of my sermon today, in the Genesis chapter, God created all of us together to be in community so that all of life can thrive. And people thrive when nature's thriving. And so when we have those things together, that's community. And so part of the community engagement piece that I see is, yes, connecting members of our congregation to that passion that is speaking inside them to what they see as the world's greatest need. Or maybe it is something that they haven't recognized yet as the greatest need of the world. But then adding to that, I'm hoping to pull in the wellness of the wholeness of nature. And so working with Pastor Kim, we're hoping to build a green team, a ministry around the whole. So we use green to mean plants, but if you think of that even deeper, the plants are photosynthesizing light from the sun to create food for themselves, and then in that supplies food for everything else. So that's kind of like a holy photosynthesis. If we think of God in our lives and what Christ is for us, our light, and all producing new life within us so that we can be a light on a hill, an abundant life source for those around us. And so that green ministry means more than, it's just a environmental movement. No, it's more than that. It's the wellness that Kim can speak to spiritually, that wholeness of our human depth, as well as working towards bettering our community for those in our locale, for the church. And so hopefully, we are looking into working with thriving faith communities to become more energy efficient in the church. And that's not just good for the environment, but it's also good for the offering plate, because then it's hit less with a drain on energy.
Yeah.
It's a big church.
Yeah, so that's something new that we're starting underneath Amber and Kim King's leadership, is we're participating with Hoosier Power Hoosier Interfaith Power and Light, Thriving Faith Communities. It's a cohort of about 10 churches that are all working. Our stated goal is to reduce our energy consumption by 25% over the next 3 years. And some of that's LED lighting and changing heating and cooling systems, and some of it's just, you'll see some changes in the building of, more recycling availability and things like that, because we just want to be good and faithful stewards of the creation around us. So here's my question. So if you want to be in that ministry, come see Amber if this is a passion of yours. My question is, what about for those of us that this is not a core passion? Like, I will raise my hand, I'm never going to eat a meat substitute. I see that stuff and I think, no way, So for those of us who may be sympathetic, but for whom it's not a core passion, like don't know how we're going to fit it in with all the other activities and challenges, the busyness of life. What about us? What should we do?
That is a perfect question, because you don't have to go all in 100% full blast to make a difference. Start with prayer. Prayer is huge. Prayer can move mountains, and support those of us that are trying to do stuff, that have the privilege of being able to do stuff. Whatever that is, there is a whole gambit of different things, from being water-minded, from being energy-minded, from recycling, through being a good example for those in the neighborhood, engaging in letter writing campaigns. I mean, there's a lot of different things, able-bodied or not. Plant a tree, change your landscaping to native plants, And you don't even have to do all that. That is a lot of stuff. But prayer and your support through all of these initiatives is also a very huge and not something to be overlooked. So support is always appreciated.
I speak as one who can very easily get overwhelmed when you start going the list of all the things you can do, because then I think, oh, I don't know how I'm going to do all that. But I guess the word that I would offer for all of us is that this is a quote from Andy Stanley, who said, people don't have problems to be fixed. Computers have problems that can be fixed. Lawnmowers have problems that can be fixed. And what he means by that is you can fix it and then voila, good as new, it'll run. He says, but people, our problems just don't work that way. Right. We don't have problems that need to be fixed. We have directions that need to be changed. Mm-hmm. And all you can do is change the direction and then stick with it long enough to see the results that you're hoping for. And that's how I think about this, among many other things in our life. Is like, there's lots of possible things we can do, but even if we just make a small step, pick one thing and say, we're going to change this direction, and then stick with it over time, the results, compound, and it's, so whatever that might be for you, if there's one small step, one small direction you can change, I hope that's your takeaway of how we can do that and be better stewards, better partners with God in caring for the world. We have a few things that are up there, things you can do to conserve water. Everything from using reusable water bottles instead of the single use to shorter showers. I like the one, use your dishwasher, because most dishwashers today are more efficient than hand washing. Mm-hmm. And so that one I can get behind all day, because that one, sure. But look at that and pick one. And every month we're going to give, as part of this, every month we're going to give some, a new focus. This August is the focus is water. Then in September will be another focus, and same thing. What are some small things we can do to help change?
Good morning. My name is Tracy Vermillion, and I am the Director of Children's Ministry here at Zionsville UMC. Thank you for joining us today. We would love to get to know you more and spend more time with you. If you'd like to know more about our faith community, please visit our church website at zumc.org. There, you'll find the many ministry opportunities we have to offer. If you need to contact one of our staff members, all our contact information is at the bottom of all the church web pages. You also can connect with us via social media throughout your week for daily inspiration and community. You'll find us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube under username Zionsville UMC. Once again, thank you for joining us this morning, and we hope you have a wonderful week.